29th day of April 2024. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm going to get started here. I'm Dana Durnford, and you can call in at 709-589-4406. And this is the ALPS system under construction February 11th, 2013. They didn't get it operating till allegedly operating till late 2014. I'll show you that stuff coming up in a little tiny bit. This is a super important show because the ALPS system, there's so much controversy for so long about this system, and so if you're not familiar, you found the right spot. Congratulations. So, for instance, this is the detonation of reactor 3. And so the official story is that didn't happen now. And the official story is nothing got out of it and everything is in the tanks. And what's in the tanks is only equal to 3 grams of sugar. And that's a South Korean professor of nuclear and quantum engineering. It's quite an incredible story, right? Nothing got out. So the official story is nothing got out of reactor 3 to your left or reactor 4 to your right. And you can go read the story yourself. Science outweighs your rational reasoning. He said the discharge like throwing 3 grams of sugar into the Pacific Ocean. And the author is a professor at the Department of Nuclear and Quantum Engineering in South Korea at the CAST. And he said, as for the other isotopes, there's only tritium, and that's equal to 2.2 grams. So officially, only 2.2 grams got out of multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pools. This should terrify you. Here's reactor, what's left of reactor 4. Officially, that never happened. The official story is that these journalists are pretending they're in the building, at the very top of the building that doesn't exist, getting fuel out of the pool. And so this is not a game. You know, there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first week. The media is belligerent for 80 years. And you need to rein this in. This is a serious event. And the food was contaminated for 14 prefectures. These are very large prefectures. For 10 years, by 55 countries, the food was banned. They should have never removed it, and they replaced the people with put the ban in place with the pro-nuclear community. The International Atomic Energy Agency is also asserting that nothing got out of the buildings that don't exist anymore. And so it's a very difficult story to source on your own. There's incredible disconnect. But now, so the headlines we got tonight about the ALPS system, and let's get back to that very quick. Clearly, there's no filtration in 2013. This is 2013. And you can go read the story. New images from the Fukushima Daiichi press tour. These images, February 11, 2013, were released by the press pool and shows the current condition of the Fukushima Daiichi. And there are also some flyover shots that show the extent of the expansion around the plant of tanks and other storage. So I'll come right back to that story. Japan's working to speed up decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi 2013. The sad fact that the actual workers, because there's no scientists or academics or nuclear corporations, the actual workers themselves were being paid $11 US a day, per day. So they like to tell you there's 7,000 people on this site working 6,000 of them are working underwater. The rest are working around the site. This was an incredible, fantastical story. In Fukushima City, which is 60 kilometers away or so, over 90,000 houses are eligible for decontamination, but you can't decontaminate a house. You're talking about radiation. It just simply doesn't work that way. So how can you have an entire community of over 300,000 people where every house and every business is so-called entitled to decontamination, but only 3 grams of sugar got out of the melted reactors? How does that actually work? Without being able to prevent the releases of radioactive material from Fukushima reactors from being dispersed across the country, reaccumulating on previously decontaminated areas, even houses that have been worked on previously will require further work in the future. So it's quite a contradiction when you go into the time machine. Okay, so let's come back to the February 11, 2013. ALPS decontamination system is under construction. That's it right there. 2013. Now the reactors melted down March 11th to March the 16th. Despite the fact that we got professors saying it didn't happen, we got the International Atomic Energy Agency telling you it didn't happen. It really did happen. And why would you build the ALPS system if it didn't happen? Now there's many systems besides the ALPS. There's the SARRY system. There's the AREVA French system. We're going to explain those to you. This is a cash storage facility. Now with 7,000 people on the site working every day in paper suits, you think they can spare more than one person, wouldn't you? So allegedly this was reactor 4 fuel pool. So here's reactor 4 is up in that corner, and that's reactor 3. Clearly the buildings were demolished down to the ground level in order to hoodwink you. And so then they built these contraptions over it, the stumps that should have been razed right to the ground. And then they claimed that they were actually in the buildings. So that sequence is super important. So the buildings, every nuclear scientist on the planet that looked at these buildings knew immediately the fuel pools and reactor cores were gone. Every one of them, without exception. Everybody at the International Atomic Energy Agency would have, when I closed, would have looked at it and said all the reactor cores and fuel pools are gone. This is just 2 of the 4 reactors that had those particular attributes where they lost the entire inventories. But that's the official picture in 2013. Like, clearly this can't exist. Clearly that's not real. But that's the official pictures. Now at the same time, because this was the press tour is what you're looking at, right? This is the press in 2013. Remember that part of the story at the very beginning? So the press is there. They allegedly at reactor 4, and they're going to get 1,500 assemblies, they say, out of this building. That doesn't exist anymore. Yet, right on the coastline, on others just a few hundred feet away, rather, they still haven't cleaned up the debris by the pump house. I mean, this is pretty significant. This is the press tour that same day. And remember, they were talking about how they had aerial shots. So those tanks, you see these tanks here? That was the aerial shots, the growing expansion of tanks 2013. See how they're walking on steel plates? That's a super important facet of the story. So they're building this construct, this contraption. They built it off site and they brought it there and they're assembling it with cranes. Now the idea is, ultimately it looks like this. Now you can see the debris on the ground, right? Or not on the ground, but on the building. It's simply, these are panels. They're laid there by the cranes. There's nothing inside of it. But yet, here's the media pretending that they're in that building, right? So these homeless, this could be Photoshop, but I'm sure they're killing the homeless because, as you say, they're getting $11 a day to work there. So this was a 190-foot building, but how tall is what's left there? Because that's important because the reactor and the fuel pools were at the top of the reactor 4 building. But you see the yellow over there. Look how close that actually is to the ground. And what you see there is like a fence they installed at that side of the building. When you look down on reactor 4, look at the debris over there. You can see the debris down here. And allegedly, this is Photoshop, obviously, because the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings, not the bottom of the buildings. So, TEPCO to abandon their AREVA system amid the contaminated water crisis, August 12, 2014. So the AREVA system didn't work. And for the last 3 years, the system had been unused and kept out of operation. The radiation levels measured in the system posed a risk to workers during operation and maintenance of the systems. In other words, they couldn't use it. They turned it on, put some water, highly radioactive water through it, and then had to run away. And it was very difficult to disassemble, apparently. April 21st, 2014, TEPCO unable to bring contaminated water issues under control at Fukushima. The advanced liquid processing has yet to function reliably. This is April the 21st, 2014. And there are certain parts of the site they don't even have full control. In other words, there's certain parts of the site they can't go to, lethal doses. Because it's not like 3 grams of sugar, like the professor from South Korea claimed earlier. So let me just take you through this first part, and then we'll get back to headlines about the ALPS. TEPCO says the groundwater bypass operation is not having an effect. Underground bypass. The groundwater bypass operations are failing to reduce the tons of water from entering. Now, calling these reactors crippled is completely dishonest, right? You don't call this crippled. They're gone. They don't exist anymore. And all the media will call them crippled. And they don't know when, if ever, the pumping operation, which is they're going to stop water coming down the mountain and pump it directly into the ocean so it doesn't run through the site. It didn't work. They were going to build a fence, they said, to stop the radiation from leaking. Does anything look like it's leaking into these, or does it look like it's long gone, or it's hemorrhaging out every time it rains on them? Because that's so important, because the future of humanity, 8 million species, are depending upon you. You are the resistance. This is not a game. This is serious stuff. They couldn't build a fence. He said it was going to cost $1 billion. But you can't build a fence, first off. And second off, the reactors are long gone, right? They were gone right away. This is the pump house. This is where all the debris, the transport trucks I showed you earlier, were on this side of the building, which is the seaside this way, towards me. So there is no building there. So their theory that everything is in the tanks is meant to manipulate you. And then the media pretending they're actually in a building that doesn't exist, that should frighten you. That's your media. How can you forgive them for that? How can you look past that? How do we reestablish trust when their job is to cut your throat? And that's what they're very good at too, by the way. And that's what they're doing right there. This is not a game. This is what they've done. And all I'm doing is showing you the evidence. And we got 21 people. At 13 likes. 13 likes on the most important story in human history that I've been doing these streams for over 10 years. I have 13 likes. 13 likes. And 21 people. On a story, on a subject that defines the existence of humans and the 8 million species, whichever survives up to now from the 13 years of unmitigated emissions. is Japan and the International Atomic Energy Agency's claim they're filtering Fukushima nuclear water, a diabolical cover-up and a deadly deception? And the answer is pretty clear. It's a very straightforward answer. In June, TEPCO was forced to admit the ice wall operation was unsuccessful. They failed to deliver on a fence because you can't build a fence. The ice wall, of course, why would you build an ice wall? And a refrigeration plant, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you build a real wall? And if there was areas where you couldn't, because of underground construction or something like that, you can probably put a little ice wall there. But why would you build an ice wall around the whole site? Because it was free, taxpayers paid for it. There was an enormous amount of money, so there was a lot of theft. But why would you build a wall if you were serious, an ice wall? Why wouldn't you build a real wall? And the refrigerator plant is $12 million a year for maintenance. $12 million. $12 million. When you could have built a real wall and just walked away. But a wall won't do it. There's no top, there's no bottom. This is not rocket science. And by building a wall around nuclear meltdowns, you cause liquefaction, where the ground becomes like quicksand, becomes unstable. It seems like they only hired the stupidest and the most incompetent and the most vicious people imaginable. They flew over the country, that part of the Fukushima prefecture rather, the Americans did, at 1,000 feet above ground. Tells you how radiation works. At 3 million becquerels per square meter detected, 20 kilometers from the plant. Now they're talking about iodine-131. So there's all kinds of mathematical equations to extrapolate. There will be equal many other isotopes in that sample. But they use iodine-131 because when you look it up, it has an 8-day half-life. And the average person doesn't understand what that means, and they think it's 8 days. But the whole idea is to completely make it impossible for you to rationalize or comprehend any facet of the story. And they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, I'm sure. January 24th, 2013, TEPCO plans to dump water stored at Fukushima Daiichi into the Pacific. So they had already released enormous amounts of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of leaks. Like calling the buildings that don't even exist anymore leaks, calling that a leak, I don't know how to rationalize. Let me play this clip. Let me play this clip for you.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So, you can't be on a building that doesn't exist. Am I right or am I wrong? If you agree with me, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Not that it matters. I don't care if you give me a thumbs up. I really don't care. I'm just saying that on a subject, the most important subject in human history, I am censored by digits, right? It's just like, you know, you take your computer, you turn your music up or you turn your music down, for instance, or your volume up, volume down. That's how they censor me. It's the same kind of switch. And they say, okay, Dana can get 100 views every 10 hours. And then when the show is over, have no views. After the water is passed through the crippled unit, it's crippled. They call that crippled, and everybody uses the same word in the media. It's processed through the SARRY system to remove cesium. So all the isotopes are the same size. And you can't just, you can put 200 million of these isotopes on the head of a needle, atoms on the head of a needle, and you can't see it. So how are you going to separate the 200 million atoms on the head of a needle that are anthropogenic man-made atoms? Let's say there's 500,000 of them are cesium. How are you going to separate them? It just doesn't work that way because the atom is so small that if you got 200 million of them, the best filters you got can't filter it. So how are you going to filter a fraction of it? It simply can't be done, see? Because there's no critical thinking skills for the majority of the population, and they know it. So the SARRY system didn't work. The Korean system, which had the same attributes, it's just a story to placate you until you stop paying attention. Oh, they got the SARRY system, they got the Korean system, they got the ALPS system, they got the AREVA system, Dana. But the evidence clearly shows none of it works. Common sense will tell you that anyway, because you keep calling it crippled and leaks and stuff like that. So TEPCO says the ALPS operation for September of 2013, but I'll show you the headlines coming up in a minute. It didn't even try to work until late 2014, but it can't work because the ALPS system was the same thing. So I'm going to play this video of the tanks. And the tanks were all full. There was 1,000 of them in 2013. I think it was late 2013. This is Rupert Winfield Hayes from the BBC. And I'll get it out of the way because this is important for these headlines coming up.
The Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So the tanks were filled, they said, from stuff they pumped up underneath the buildings in 2013. The ALPS system wasn't working, the AREVA system wasn't working, the Korean system wasn't working, the SARRY system. Not only were they not working, they can't work. It can't do the job. You can't filter it because you can never get near the filter again. So TEPCO sent a press release announcing their plan to attempt the ALPS by September of 2013, which was around the same time as they shot that video right there. And so when there's a lot of these headlines that are pre these dates where they say they had filtered the water, but they had no filtration system whatsoever. And we have already established that all the way up to here, right? The existing water treatment facilities can remove mainly cesium. In order to remove other radioactive materials, achieve further reduction of the radioactivity density of the treated water. We have developed a multinuclide removal system, which is the ALPS. But you can't remove cesium and leave all the other isotopes there. It doesn't work that way. And because it's not just isotopes, it's fuel particulates. You're spraying water over the reactors. There's no way to get a hose in the building to pump water out. It simply can't be done that way. But that's the official story. And so their story is built on a house of cards. And if you get a gust of wind, everything's going to fall apart, right? We're planning to commence actual operation in September of that year. So they're admitting that in late 2013, they wouldn't have had no filtration systems for the so-called highly contaminated water. But now we know, according to BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes, in late 2013, that the tanks were full, all of them, 1,000 large tanks were full of highly radioactive water that was under the reactor buildings from an aquifer, right? So TEPCO chose to not stop water leaks in 2011 over fears their stock prices. So this is an important facet of the story where they weren't trying to stop water. They can't put it in tanks because it's so radioactive you can't get back on the site. And remember, the people working on the site are making $11 a day, not an hour, but a day. So let's walk you down this facet because this is important. And this was September 18, 2013. TEPCO had known about the massive groundwater intrusion and leaks. You can't call these leaks. But if you go back to the history of nuclear, whenever there's an accident, they'll call it a leak. And I completely disrespect these people for the rest of my life for doing that. At the site since at least May of 2011, the company chose not to do nothing out of fear of the high cost, $1 billion, and he spent, $270 billion already, would cause investment markets to consider the company bankrupt. An extra $1 billion was going to cause the company to be bankrupt? The company was already bankrupt. It was nationalized. The only reason it existed because it was on the stock exchange, and then the government takes the fall, right? Not the government, but the taxpayers. Contaminated waters leaked out of the plant for the last 2.5 years. And TEPCO only admitted this in July. So in July 2013, they admitted not only that the word leak, it's unconscionable that any industry in this predicament would use the word leak. It's unconscionable. It's unconscionable. It should be mandatory life in jail for calling these things a leak. And that might sound harsh if you don't understand the big picture, but we're talking about an extinction level event. This is already established. We know this is an extinction event. It's caused by perpetual pulse event, but perpetual 80 years of emissions, but it's caused by these multiple reactors with decades of reactor cores that were at the top of the buildings, and it doesn't exist. But now they're saying, the International Atomic Energy Agency included, as of July the 13th last year, that this never happened. And so they're out telling a completely different story. And the only time you're going to find this story and these pictures and this documentation is if you can find me. And good luck on finding me. How many people have found me tonight? Wow, 25 people. Wonderful people at that. But 25 people. In the most important story in human history. Bar nothing. There is nothing more important. And, I put my number up there all the time. You know how many nuclear scientists call me? None. You know how many nuclear academics call in to try to correct me? None. You know how many nuclear scientists, the nuclear alumni, nuclear students have called into the show? None. You know how many of them have participated in the comments section? None. You know how many nuclear corporations have come here and said, Danny, you're wrong about this, or you're wrong about that, or anything like that? None. You know, when I came in from research expeditions, they actually arrested me and gave me gag orders for 3.5 years to sort of protect some of their assets because I was exposing them like this, and they couldn't handle anybody criticizing him. And they destroyed me. They dragged me into court 16 times. In a different jurisdiction where I had to take 2 ferries and get a hotel room each time. And 15 lawyers wouldn't take my case despite the fact I had cash. They wouldn't touch me. And so the official story is now that never happened, even though that happened. And now we have an extinction event, and because I've done the research expeditions, you can find that up at the nuclearproctologist.org, or you can come to my playlist and find tons about it. TEPCO chose to not stop water leaks in 2013 over fear of the stock price. They called it leaked out of the plant for 2 to 5. It's so disgusting that somebody would even suggest Fukushima was a leak. Like, for that reason alone, we should ban nuclear on the planet. For that one reason alone, that they would call something like this a leak. For that incredible... Like, they don't have a right to destroy our planet. They don't have a right to kill you and your loved ones and your friends and your family with poison. And nuclear poison is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So yeah, it's a poison. Of the worst nature imaginable. And the illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that manifest from this poison are insidious and relentless for the rest of your life. They never go away. And they sterilize you and the species and your loved ones and your children and everything else in increments over time. This is not a game. The talks of the TEPCO and the government agencies involving the TEPCO should be split into 2 companies. One to handle the bad assets and the disaster, and another to run their still functioning divisions of their nuclear plant. This would effectively allow TEPCO to walk away from the disaster and no repercussions for the company. Which is, again, this is insanity. Now, they want you to blame TEPCO so you don't blame the nuclear industry. So you don't blame the Japanese government. So you don't blame the people that built it on a fault line with a 3,000-year legacy of 300-foot tsunamis and a 3,000-year legacy of thousands of earthquakes in that zone, and right 60 kilometers away from tectonic plates. Like, why would you build something there? Literally, unless you're waiting for it to happen, to melt down, why else would you build it there? Fukushima contaminated water problems worsened. August 9, 2014. TEPCO announced a week they want to begin pumping up water from the sub-drains near the reactor buildings. Now remember, I played a video before where they pumped up water from under the reactors and filled up the 1,000 tanks. Because that's super important. This comes as they were also admitting the efforts to freeze the trench were not going well. Why wouldn't you just build a wall? Which would have done the job the first time. The plan would include decontaminating this water before dumping it into the sea. The disaster site has struggled with water decontamination for years and just announced recently that they think they finally have the ALPS decontamination system operational. That's August 9, 2014. That's almost 3.5 years later, no filtration system whatsoever. The tanks were filled up in 2013, and I played that video earlier from the BBC with Rupert and Phil Hayes. So this is not a game. And I would be out there curb stomping this industry into oblivion if we had a foundation that would work with me or work behind me. It would help fund this operation so we can go after these monsters, these cowards, these criminals, these mass murderers, these genocide machines. These incredibly cowards, including the people that censor me. Incredible cowardness. And imagine censor me so that the world can't have a future, so they can get a paycheck and go home and pretend that they're a good person to their significant others and tell their friends they're actually a good person. Yet their job is to stop me from warning the planet and educating the planet and then coming up with solutions by proxy. So 2014, the ALPS system is still not working. And all the tanks were full in 2013, and I played that clip earlier. And so, like, that's the whole equation right there, isn't it? Because just announced recently, they think they finally have the ALPS decontamination system operational August 9, 2014. The subdrain pumping might remove some groundwater, but could also draw highly contaminated water out of the reactor buildings. Like, and I'm going to explain to you the numbers of this stuff coming up in a second. The lack of a clear understanding of where the corium for the 3 reactors is located, but there's actually 4 reactors. Reactor 4 actually melted down. So when you're doing the fuel, because they were doing fuel changing, that's reactor 4. The reactor core is in the fuel pools at the very top of the buildings, 190 feet, 19-story, 65-meter buildings, the same as reactor 3. We need to get busy. We need to be fighting back. Like I've done so much research, it's like ocean research, to quantify that this is not a game. And in desperation, I'm here 5 days a week, beating the shit out of myself. And today, let me go back. I got a couple of videos from today. I'm not going to get through all of my stuff. Let me play a couple of videos from today. We recently got last week we bought another trailer, cheap as we can get it, because we can't afford to do anything. We're completely stymied. But we're trying. We're doing the best we can. And we're going to use the small trailer to put the little Zodiac on. And you know, I need a new engine on my big Zodiac. That's been to Alaska 6 times, right? And just, it's so dangerous to get out there on the ocean with the equipment that I'm using. But here's the trailer that I'm fixing up somehow or another. Yeah, I know, it's rust. Trust me, I know. So I got the wheels off it today on both sides. You'll see it in the next video, I think.
Gonna have to get bushings for each side.
And so I got to get the sleeves for
double, right?
3 sleeves for each side. They're cheap.
The other side.
They're not very much. They're like $25 altogether or something.
There's a bar that comes
or I got to
down
rebuild
that
it.
turns on
It's cracked off.
back here.
Let me turn it up. I'm
Put
sorry.
this one here. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. And the bolt is behind here for this back part right here. There's a bolt in there behind that. And so apparently this was just welded. There was a bar hanging down and was welded. And that's probably 20 years ago, but it looks like it. I can't see it, I guess, in the... Probably can't see it because the camera, cell phone, right? But I gotta let all of this go, and it needs bushings for up here. So it needs 1, 2, 3 bushings. 3 bushings on the other side. And right now the axle is sitting right on the frame. And so it wasn't going to come apart on me, per se, because it looks like the back is secured. And the back. I got no idea about the back, but and so this is really old-fashioned because these go butt up against the tire and the rim, and then the bolt goes on top of it, right? So it's that mechanism that holds the rim onto that there. And well, this side seems like it's okay. I gotta pull the grease caps off and see what it looks like in there. Yeah. So we get the other side off.
That seems to be a bit better than the other side. I might have to replace the bearings on this side. I might have to replace the bearings because you can hear the difference, right? And look, it's not bad, but it sounds like the bearings are just, they're not bad or something, but it shouldn't be too bad of a job. So I'm going to have to let go because these bushings are shot, and you can see how wrecked that actually is. I think if I put a bushing in there though, it'll be okay. I think so. It's the same thing with this one, right? If I put a bushing in that one, it should be okay. And it seems like the back ones are okay. Because there's a bolt right there, which is holding up that piece, right? And then this piece needs to, there's supposed to be an extension coming down from underneath. I probably can't see it. It's supposed to be an extension like that one. And so if I can conquer that, so right now I'm just going to clean up the rims for something to do. And look how bad the tires are. Holy shit, eh? That's pretty rough. I have to do something. If they see that, they're going to pull me over. But I guess they won't see it when I'm driving. If he drives by and I'm stopped, I'm done. I think this one is warped, this tire. It's bulged, eh? Because it was wobbly when it was on there. But once I took it off, then the tires, or the hubcap is okay. And, like, there's nothing going to happen fast with that. I know somebody's saying use the scrapyard, but you don't understand. On the East Coast, you get jack shit from the scrapyards in this place, and they'll charge you an awful lot just for nothing, trust me. There's no real scrapyards anywhere near me. You know me, on the mainland I've done that kind of stuff whenever I had to, but you know, when I was healthy, I was a commercial diver. I make $5,000 a day. And so the trailer, that axle is probably 40 years old or something, right? You see the way the whole thing is set up? It's very old. It's salvageable. I just got to do the work. I got to get sleeves. I got to get like 6 or 7, or 8 sleeves. I think there's $10 for 4 or something, right? But that's only for the springs, right? Then I got to weld a metal plate coming down and drill it out and then bolt it back on. So because it was riding on the frame, right? We'll get there. That was today. It was raining. It was miserable. Heavy chemtrails today. Yeah, no, it's okay, Brody. I'm not saying nothing to you. I'm just responding. Just being honest. Unfortunately, I can't. I hear you. Unfortunately, I just can't do it. TEPCO sets ALP operation for September of that year, 2013. But that never happened, did it? In 2014, in August, they still didn't have it operational. A year after they said they were going to have it up and running. But remember, they were building it in early 2013. They were just starting to build it. And the tanks were all full in 2013. The existing water treatment facility can remove mainly cesium. In order to remove other radioactive materials, achieve further reductions in radioactivity density of the treated water, They developed a multi-nuclide removal equipment. They developed it. They developed it because it didn't exist. They developed it. Well, it doesn't work. It can't work. And I'll explain that coming up, actually, in a little tiny bit. They chose not to stop the water leak. We already covered that. TEPCO chose not to stop the water leak. When talks out of TEPCO and the government agencies involved, the TEPCO should be split into two companies. We covered that. Fukushima contaminated water problems worsened August 9, 2014. And just now, it's recent that they think they finally have the ALPS system operating. And that was August 9, 2014. Still didn't have it operating, but they think they might be on track. Okay, here we go again. Japanese government, 2013 in August. TEPCO's poor management of leaks at Fukushima, no other than Yoshihide Suga, which is the former prime minister. After a couple of years later, right? Here he was criticizing TEPCO, which is not a decommission authority. Shouldn't be in position of that. But the reason they left him in charge, so you'll blame TEPCO for the death of the planet and the oceans and your loved ones, not the nuclear industry, see? And this tells you this industry got to go. And I know what the industry is out there laughing their arse off, saying, oh, how cute, you got 25 people on his show, and he's saying the industry got to go. Yeah, but it's a show I've been doing for a decade, and I'm targeting people with documentation. So any policymakers or investors comes along, they're not going back to nuclear. TEPCO releases a video of groundwater entering the crippled Fukushima Daiichi plant. So we're talking about 2.2 sieverts per liter. 2.2 sieverts. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose to a human. Walking past it. Just spending a bit of time right there is a lethal dose. You'll die that day or that week. And the other 50% will die the next week. So the numbers we're talking about, if you put this per liter in a filter, guess what happens? After a couple of moments, you have to run away because the filter is a lethal dose from hundreds of feet away. You can't filter it. It just doesn't work that way. And letting them continue to deceive us, the population, manipulate the population, is you're letting an industry destroy humanity and your friends, your families, your loved ones, your future, the 8 million species. You're letting them destroy it. Those are in the positions that are censoring me, for instance, are enabling these people to destroy everything they covet. Really, like what the frig is wrong with you people that would censor me? What's wrong with Greenpeace, who I contacted multiple times, and they blocked me? Because I shared that picture and videos of media pretending they were in Reactor 4. They blocked me for that. I was ostracized from all Greenpeace sites. I was the scourge of Greenpeace. How dare I tweet this video or picture to him and ask him to retweet it? How dare I? TEPCO is still struggling to keep their head above the contaminated water of Fukushima 2013. The laboratory tests were showing 8.7 million atoms of tritium, 2.35 billion atoms of cesium, 750 million atoms of other radioactive material in each liter of contaminated water. First off, the 8.7 million atoms of tritium would have been drowned out by the 2.35 billion atoms of cesium. And the Becquerels is the pulse of energy every second from each atom. And they're going to do that. The same atom will pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second. Almost at the speed of light every second for who knows how long. Long past the human experience and species experience on this planet. 8.7 million atoms of tritium would have been, the single, because it's so weak, would have been drowned out by the 2.35 billion atoms of cesium in a liter of water. The 750 million becquerels other radioactive materials, gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. Why didn't they articulate any of them? They just clump it up like that. Why would you do that? And more than 5,000 tons of the contaminated water are captured in leaking out of this one cable trench. And look at the numbers. The numbers are astronomical. And now, so if that's real, then you can't get near that part of the site. You're talking huge lethal doses from 1,000 feet away. It's more efficient than a sniper round. And so 5,000 tons is 5 million liters, by the way. And each liter is unbelievable amount. With 5 million of those liters, you're not getting near that area of the site ever again, because the ground would be saturated with that. And that's why you see those steel plates, by the way, so the homeless don't drop dead too quick. In case one hasn't paid attention, the constant stream of international experts who have called for TEPCO to be removed as the organization in charge of decommissioning the crippled Fukushima Daiichi reactors. A steady stream of experts called for TEPCO to be removed. Of course he did. The nuclear industry is not going to go there, for starters. You don't see the International Atomic Energy Agency hanging around there. That's for sure. So, to show you how evil this industry actually is, how unconscionable this industry actually is, this story really does tell the story. Elementary school in Kuriyama City is using water bottles to shield the students from the X-rays, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the gamma shines. But because you're talking about, for that to exist in a city that far away, then it's airborne. And that entire school is polluted, that entire community, by the way, is entitled, every house is there is entitled in Kuriyama City, 340,000 people to be decontaminated, but you can't decontaminate a house. And so the elementary school, Kuriyama City, 34 miles west of the Fukushima Daiichi disease factory, had students bring in water bottles, empty bottles to school, and they fill them up with water and they stack them inside and outside the classrooms to shield the student from the shine and the beta rays and the neutron bombardments. It's using water bottles to shield the radiation coming from the courtyard and the other areas around the school building. The bottles are filled, so the people there believe that, because they bought into this millisievert, microsievert routine, they believe that they have to worry about the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays. And they do. But because the nuclear plant is not going to have gamma rays coming from the nuclear plant to the school 35 miles away, right? The shine from the tanks and from the site is not going to reach that far. Which means that the whole area is contaminated with actual radioactive fallout. And so you can find that as millisieverts or microsieverts, but that's not how you would want to do it. You would do it in the physical atoms, because that's what you're talking about, which means, and it likes to hang out close to the ground where the kids are too, on top of that. So rather than remove the children from that area, they put water bottles in boxes, and they were convinced by the nuclear industry that they're okay if they done that. Is using water bottles to shield the radiation coming from the courtyards. The bottles are filled with water placed inside of square boxes, which are stacked around the classroom, inside and, as you can see, outside. According to the school, it reduced the radiation levels inside by 1/3. You're being poisoned at a rate we've never heard tell of before. All of this is unprecedented. And it demands this entire planet to come to their senses and come together and hold this industry to a higher standard. We've ran out of time. The clock has already stopped ticking. It's time to get busy. I'm struggling constantly to keep this conversation. I'm struggling all day, every day, actually, to keep this show going and keep this conversation going. But I'm also trying to do research, which is insane, on a budget that most people can't even comprehend, that there's no academic on the planet would work with my budgets. No academic on the planet is going to take an old trailer and try to fix it up so they can get it and do some research. It's just never going to happen. They're given the best of the best. They're given dually trucks. They're given great big trailers. They're given $1 million boats to go work with. And we struggle. Like, it's inconceivable how much I have to struggle. It's unimaginable. And I don't have time for people to play games. I really don't. I don't have time to play games. I'm only interested in dealing with this and talking about this subject. I can't handle distractions. This is too real. This is too serious. And if you went on a research, if you looked at my research expeditions, you would know how real this actually is. Absorbed red bone marrow doses in Japan for the first year. United Nations Scientific Committee on Effects of Atomic Radiation, UNSCR. These are crazies. These people shouldn't even exist. They have no sovereignty over any country. You have no authority in your country or anybody else's country. You are being manipulated by the worst of worst that human has to offer. Everything in the nuclear industry seems to be coward in overdrive, monster in overdrive. Average disposition density of cesium-137 on soil. So you're seeing atoms, physical atoms, they call it Becquerel, but that's the pulse every second. And it takes an atom to do it, right? An anthropogenic man-made one. And there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So the first one is naming community over the district. The population is the next line. And the highlighted line is atoms per square meter. Well, typically, pre-Fukushima, would have been 180 atoms per square meter would have been an evacuation zone at a nuclear plant. And now the communities are living in tens and hundreds of thousands. So Koriyama City got 162,000 atoms per square meter of just cesium-137, because according to these pieces of shit, these disgusting maggots, these parasites of humanity, these cockroaches of humanity, only cesium exists. And they've been doing this for 80 years, and they've manipulated the majority of the population. But don't fall for it. And I might sound rough. I might be pretty, what some people might consider colorful talking. We got an extinction event going on. Playing games is not an option anymore. We're at 13 years on death's door, knocking on death's door, not heaven's door. Elementary school in Japan is using water bottles to shield a student. So their community is completely radiated. Why aren't they evacuated? Because this industry is so evil. It's so relentlessly, and it's a relentless evilness that we see with this industry. While school lunches are tested for radiation, the parents, think about this, your school lunches are tested for radiation in a nuclear wasteland. And you're not finding nothing. In a nuclear wasteland. We're concerned because they're largely unable to find out where the items were originally produced. Koriyama City has said the evacuation zone, the government has barely conducted any decontamination activities. You can't decontaminate a town. And by whoever wrote the story didn't even do the basic research. He just tells the story, and if you don't know the difference, you're going to buy into this narrative that is easy to correct. It's actually easy to articulate if you even tried. February 24, 2014, Tokyo Electric determines human error as a cause of contaminated leaks. Again, you hear the word leaks. Every time we hear the word leaks, a nuclear scientist should get 1,000 years in jail for it. According to the utility, over 100 tons of water containing 240 million atoms per liter of beta ray. What about the gammas, alphas, and neutrons? How can you just have beta? You can't just have beta. Emitting substances leaked out of the storage tanks. So, like, per liter, the storage tank can't just be beta. And so you're pumping water, allegedly, from the reactors into the tanks. That's the official story. Which means, and we know they had no filtration system. We covered that for the first half an hour or more, right? That whole filtration system. We covered every facet of it, and they came up wanting, right? Over a period of 9 hours before the leak was discovered. First off, 100 tons in 9 hours at 240 million atoms per liter of just beta. You're not getting near that tank. You're not going to resolve that. And the fact that the tank would have had that kind of activity into it, which is basically 1.4 million sieverts in the tank of just beta, which means you don't get back on the site. You're talking that's a sniper round from 1,000 feet away. 1.4 million sieverts. It's not unheard of numbers, by the way. So it's the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, people that are incapable of comprehending the enormity of the gravity of this scenario are being sacrificed to the nuclear industry. Can tell you there's a leak. If I was the president of a large country, I would lock up every nuclear scientist in the country immediately as a mitigation to the health of the country and the 8 million species. And your camera's not going to work anywhere now. Look, they got a big plastic bag around a pipe over there filling up with the numbers that would mean you can never get near it. The bag is just going to bust at some point. Well, first off, you couldn't get near it because there's a leak there of 100 tons, 100,000 liters at 2.2 sieverts per hour. This is a couple of 100,000 sieverts on the ground is what we're talking about. You know, you can't get near that. They were begging for money, so they came up with that story. It was just a fake story because there is nothing in the tanks. Whatever is in the tanks is just rainwater or natural water. If you fill the tank up with this kind of stuff, you can't get back on the site, so it can't be real. Per liter, better, partially treated water from early in the disaster in 2011. So how could you partially treat it in February 2024 when in August the ALPS system still wasn't working? The AREVA system didn't work. The SARRY system couldn't work. The Korean system didn't work. How could you partially treat it? And if this is considered partially treated, even if you did partially treat it, and that was what was left over, you can never get into the filtration system, the room, or the building ever again from a single 20-minute run. TEPCO submits the criteria to the Nuclear Regulation Authority to dump the contaminated rainwater in 2013 in the ocean. And look at this. Spilling, blah, 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 blah. This is simply not real. In the new proposal submitted to Regulatory Authority, 2013, there's no filtration systems whatsoever, as we know, because if you watched the video, I showed you all that evidence. Diluted to under 10 atoms of beta-ray emitting nuclides will discharge it into the ocean. But if you go look at 2014, January 20th, months later, the stream of water a foot wide flowing through the first floor of the reactor building, accumulated in the basement of the reactor buildings, was 24 million becquerels of beta-ray, strontium, 700,000 becquerels of cesium-134, 1.7 million atoms of liters of cesium-137. So you can't dilute that. You couldn't filter. There was no filtration system. This is what I mean. You'll catch them lying the minute that you're honest. You'll catch them in all these lies. And then you got the worst of the worst at the nuclear industry itself, the regulators, the non-regulatory people. And you could just see Carlos is a lunatic with the International Atomic Energy Agency. And he's claiming they're unable to prevent the eventual release of tritium water. Not even call it tritium 3H, but call it just tritium. But like the numbers that I'm showing you means there is no tritium. If the tritium, well, everything is tritiated. Everything is tritiated. Anyway, worldwide, not just Fukushima. Because it's saturated with uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, and 80 years of emissions on top of that. All the dumpings, all the meltdowns, all the venting they've done into the ecosystem, all the fuel pools hemorrhaging. It's time to deal with this. It's time to gut up and get to war. It's time to make a stand. You are making Earth's last stand. This is Earth's last stand. So an International Atomic Energy Agency is coming out when we know and saying this is tritium and that they should be allowed just to dump it at will. These are the lowest forms of life conceivable. But the reality of it is, if we wouldn't dump it on our land, why should we dump it in the ocean? Why is it so necessary? All the other options they had, if it was true what they were saying, why couldn't they just drill holes and dump it down there, right? Why dump everything into the ocean? Because that's what they've been doing the entire time. And then the minute that you say, yes, that is okay, go ahead and dump it in the ocean, now they don't have to explain away what happened for 13 years. If a cargo ship at sea is found to be deliberately dumping waste overboard, they're banned from doing business in many international markets. Not just nuclear, but any waste. And it seems that the continuous batch releases of the contaminated water will become standard operating procedures of Fukushima as long as TEPCO is allowed to remain in control. And TEPCO is not a decommissioning and decontamination organization. They're on the stock exchange. They're a nuclear operator, and therefore their approach to mitigate and deal with disaster both before and after is extremely telling. And through international support, the contaminated water problem may be dealt with in a more responsible, publicly acceptable manner. The question is, how much more time is needed until the tipping point is reached? Okay. November the 18th, 2013. Here's TEPCO. They're saying they're in the fuel pool of reactor 4. And now there's 70 reactors in the United States look exactly like their reactor. That's Unit 4. Would be a 65-meter, 195-foot building. At the top of the building are 2 fuel pools and the reactor core. So it's not there. It doesn't exist. It's completely gone. It's gone right to the ground. There's nothing left whatsoever. But here they are. TEPCO begins critical work on loading Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4 spent fuel pool. And they're showing you this picture, they're showing you these people. And when you zoom in, why is that redacted? Why is it so important to hide that? And at the top of it, why is that redacted? And then why is this redacted? You can see the pixelated. So they claim they're getting 1,500 assemblies out of the top of a building that doesn't even exist. And all the media was more than happy to go along with that version. And they went there in 2013. Now remember, they had no filtration system. The AREVA system in late 2014 still wasn't working. But yet they claim they're on top of a building on a site that hasn't been decommissioned, that the tanks were full in 2013. Like orchestrated, weaponized against humanity, the media. So much influence, so much power, and so heartless. They think because they're going to get a big paycheck out of it, right? They don't think there's any. They know what they're doing. They don't care. They got their paycheck out of it. They went to university to get an education to tell the law in the first place. But they never got nothing out of the building because everything was destroyed right away. It's been labeled some of the most dangerous operation in the world. So going into a building that don't exist is the most dangerous operation in the world. So 1% plutonium by weight. So they're saying there's 80 fuel rods, but that's not true. There's 100 fuel rods in each assembly, and each fuel rod is 18 pounds and 12 feet long, which by assembly can contain up to 75 trillion becquerels of radioactivity. It's actually infinitely worse than that. It's infinitely worse than that. Each fuel assembly, they're saying, can only contain 75,000 trillion atoms. It's the minute that you light up a nuclear reactor, it has to split atoms. So everything is ignited. This is why it's full of uranium, plutonium pellets. And so let's look at the numbers, for instance. Around 1% is plutonium by weight. So if we use their numbers at 80 times 18, because they weigh 18 pounds each, that's 1,440 pounds. It's actually 1,800 pounds. They're actually 100 fuel rods in each assembly. And the reason that is stuffed like that is because they don't have a repository anywhere worldwide. And so they're not going to be, just 4/5 full because they need the room, right? They've changed laws a number of years ago to allow them to put even more waste in their fuel pools because they don't have a repository to store it. And which means these assemblies got 100 fuel rods in them each. Because why would you build something so technical and only use 80%? because it's simply not true. It's 100% full. But let's say it's 80%, right? Which is 80 fuel rods. That's 14 pounds, 14.4 pounds per assembly. So they say there's 1,311 spent fuel assemblies, 222 are unused. You don't put unused assemblies in the fuel pools. There's no need to. They're unused. But if we just go with their numbers, again, which is way lowballing it, that's 18,000, almost 19,000 pounds of plutonium in each of the buildings. There's 4 buildings, so that's 80,000 pounds of plutonium. 80,000 pounds of plutonium. It's 80,000. So Nagasaki Nagasaki was equal to about 10 pounds. Because Hiroshima was a uranium bomb, Nagasaki was a plutonium bomb. In fact, all bombs after Nagasaki or Hiroshima were plutonium bombs or hydrogen plutonium bombs. So you're talking about almost 18,000 pounds if you lowball the numbers, because this is what they keep doing over and over and over and over. But the real numbers is 1,800 pounds per assembly. So just for, let's do the calculator. We know what the numbers are, right? So there's 1,500 assemblies, and they're 1,800 pounds in each assembly because you don't have a repository anywhere in Japan, so they're stuffed. That's per pool, I would imagine. There's 3,840 assemblies in each building, actually, the real number. That's what was in them. They lowballed you and told you it was... Let me go backwards again. So let's look at the real numbers. We got them there, but I'm not going to dig them up right now. So it's let's go 3,450 assemblies. Multiply it by 1,800 pounds per assembly. Is 6 million per building. Then let's multiply that by 1%. Oh, that's a percent. What did I do wrong there? So that's 250,000 pounds in 4 reactors, or 200,000 pounds, 240,000 pounds in 4 reactors. So we got a poll for everybody tonight, and the most important subject in human history. We got 25 viewers according to the censors. Is Japan International Atomic Energy Agency claims they're filtering Fukushima nuclear waste a diabolical cover-up and a deadly deception? Yes. If there's a full release of reactor 4 without any containment or control, which could cause by far the most serious radiological accident to date. And so reactor 4 is completely gone. But another interesting facet to reactor 4 is reactor 1 blew up. We got the videos and pictures of it. Reactor 2 blew up, or 3 blew up. We got videos and pictures. But we don't have a picture of reactor 4 blowing up or video. How come? How can we have... They're on each side. They're right alongside of it. Reactor 3 is right alongside of it. Reactor 1 is just 2 buildings away. So how can we not have a video of that when they're all taken by the same camera? The assemblies could, which was a security camera from 30 kilometers away. The assemblies could also be moved too close together. The spent fuel rods could break or be exposed to air and potentially ignite. Both scenarios potentially release a massive amount of radiation, which could necessitate the evacuation of workers from the plant. Well, the workers are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language. They're not nuclear scientists. They're not nuclear students. They're not nuclear companies or nuclear anything. They're the most vulnerable of society and don't even know what they're doing or up against. If the rods were to overheat or break, a self-sustained nuclear chain reaction similar to the meltdowns, worse than a meltdown because it's such a big inventory. And the colonies crippled, when the original footage clearly shows these are not, you can't call these crippled. Like the buildings blew up. When the buildings blow up like that, the word cripple and the word leak is not applicable. And this industry, who's gotten away with 80 years of this misery, this unmitigated misery against humanity, are well on their way to getting away with it again. And that is never going to be acceptable. We have no options. We got to make a stand. Somebody has to make a stand, and that's our job, apparently. Bear with me. So I didn't want to go long video tonight. I didn't want to do too long of a video tonight. I'm confused of this is a video. I'm going to speed this up. So this is the ground is cracked from the reactor number 2, has gone China syndrome, a large part of the fuel pool in the reactor core. And the same thing with reactor 1, they're gone down below the building. And so the earth is cracked open. And the steam coming out of the ground is at 10 sieverts per hour. But there's many times when the steam is coming out of the ground, this is 40 times the normal speed. I just moved you ahead. So if you're not off the site when this is happening, that's a lethal dose. You're going to die within moments, within seconds. These plumes are incredible plumes from steam coming up from the China syndrome. This is radioactive steam at lethal doses. That air is lethal dose. That's 40 times the speed. And so you would have evacuated the site for many weeks because of that. And we were picking on them for quite a bit a few years back, 5 years ago, 6 years ago or something. And we were badgering them about why don't they have, where's the 7,000 paper suits that you're using every day? And so they came up with this headline from Japan's media saying they burned 7,000 paper suits every day in the incinerators. Because they realized they didn't have an answer, right? So they watch my video, but they're the worst that humanity's ever created. They're the most bizarre people humanity's ever created. The people for the nuclear industry that are censoring me and are trying to glean some insight to each of these shows here. They're literally the worst that humans ever created. They're the furthest thing from a human species. TEPCO gets approval to release more Fukushima water. The utility hopes to be able to process and dump around 150 of the 300 tons of contaminated water being produced each day. This is 2015. So now they're claiming that they got the ALPS system up. And what they were doing was they were claiming they were filtering the water, and then half of it was going into the tanks. The other half was either being dumped or sprayed back on the melter reactors, which is the craziest statement imaginable, but they repeated that many times over the years. So a garden hose will produce 130 tons a day. It's 130 tons a day. It's 130, which is a garden hose. So 150 tons basically is a half-inch garden hose, split 4 ways on 4 melter reactors. So the science doesn't add up. Would you split, you got a nuclear meltdown at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures underneath these buildings. Are you going to split a garden hose 4 ways and spray 1/4 of a half-inch garden hose on each of these buildings? Is there any rationale to that? Now, a normal reactor needs 1 million gallons a minute, 4,500 tons a minute. Once it runs out of control, it needs a lot more water. Ambassador Kennedy tours the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. No doubt they took her over to dining or something. Now she's going to claim she's in the reactor 4 fuel pool at Fukushima. She doesn't know any different. She doesn't speak Chinese. She can't read the signs around her. So that's reactor 4. The fuel pool is 120, 140 feet above that. And this is how crazy this industry actually is. This is May 2014. 2014 April, they're running out of room to store the contaminated debris. The debris. They say they have 340. They believe they can reduce 340,000 cubic meters, 340,000 tons of debris by burning the radioactive wood debris and other combustible materials, and crushing the contaminated rubble to use to pave roads within the plant. This is the craziest statement imaginable. You're going to be fighting a nuclear meltdown for hundreds of years, and you're going to use radioactive material under people's feet. They said it can store 60,000 cubic meters in existing storage facilities, but need to find at least 160,000 cubic meters of additional space. Like, this industry has told so many lies, they can't keep up with it. Different administrations, different lies. TEPCO nearly doubled the contaminated water capacity by 2016. Well, the tanks were all full in 2013. Right, I played that video for everybody earlier. And then they built this contraption over reactor 4. Now look how tall it is. That you see the stump of reactor 4 there? That's all that's left of reactor 4. They built this contraption over it and then pretended they were in the building and everything was perfect. And all you're seeing is panels. There's nothing there. The whole structure is empty like you're seeing right here. It was built off-site and assembled. And this is them getting ready to do the exact same thing with reactor 3. There's nothing left of reactor 3. And none of these contraptions that they built physically touched the buildings. They were meant to, a single time, just come out and manipulate you. And then they were literally throwaway disposable sheds meant to trick you into believing that they have it under control because they can't be controlled. And so rather than tell the truth, come up with solutions, ask the world for help, they decided the nuclear industry and the International Atomic Energy Agency orchestrated it. They're clearly the orchestrators. And now they're even claiming that nothing happened as of July the 13th last year, 2023. And you see these random pictures of them claiming that they're at the building, right? Fukushima Prefecture requests the Japanese government remove TEPCO from the management of Fukushima Daiichi decommissioning. The prefecture. So they put Uchibori in there, and so he's as evil as you can get. So look at this. They got, these people clearly are not International Atomic Energy Agency. They wouldn't go near this site, period. And so they got this taped on their back, and that somehow quantifies it. But we know from their previous statements last year that last year was the first visit they made to the site. It was 5 times altogether, and all of them were 2023. Japan may have to change decontamination efforts after labor shortage. Labor shortage is the homeless, the destitute, the victims of. They're getting paid $11 a day. Do you think nuclear scientists are working at Fukushima for $11 a day? Where there's China syndromes, plumes are covering the entire site. Right, remember, in 2013, they had just started the ALPS system. And then I played a clip for you earlier of the BBC saying that all the tanks were full in the third quarter or the fourth quarter of 2020 or 2013. We need the world to make a stand. This world has to make a stand. We don't got the time to play games. It's time to get busy. It's time to come up with solutions. It's time to have a conversation. There's not time. We can't just keep telling these lies that they told us. It's not tenable anymore. And this industry doesn't have a right to destroy us and our planet and our species. Is Japan International Atomic Energy Agency's claims they're filtering the Fukushima nuclear water a diabolical cover-up and a deadly deception? Well, clearly, it's a diabolical. And a diabolical doesn't. The word doesn't do it justice. I don't think we have a word that does it justice. You got to make up a word, unfortunately, because how egregious and how lethal the harm has been to the species. This is lethal doses to the species. And we launched research expeditions for 6 years. For 6 years we plied the coastline. We attacked it from every direction. We done the research. We done the species counts, and clearly the species to your left have been exterminated. This is unassailable documentation. We've done this for so many years. Those species are exterminated. And from 7,000 to a couple of barely finding a couple of species. And we've done this research for 6 years in order to see if the species recovered. And I'm busted up and broken and torn apart from 6 years of doing something that I should never have had to do. That there's many other institutions could have done it. And by rights I should, you do need independent people like myself to go out and do it. But we left no stones unturned. 27,000 islands, Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. This is not a game, right? The plumes covered the entire planet. And every model, every hideous model shows us the same scenario. The stuff covered the entire planet. And we are in an extinction event. And we are not going to do this in silence. We are not going to take this sitting down. The world has... Look, the industry can't handle 100 people punching back. The industry's already fell apart with just us. This little group of people that they made all kinds of fun of us. They ridiculed us. They laughed at us. They attacked us. And we are still going strong. But we have such little support, it's frightening. Right? It's just less than a handful of people, less than 5 people contributing. And so, like normally, if I bought an old trailer like that, I'd just go out and buy a new axle, and I'd go out and buy the tires, and buy the kit, and I'd just install it, and then I'd be out the next day doing the research, because I'm a freaking bulldog. I don't know how to stop. But instead I got to turn around, grind everything off, sand everything down, or wheel everything down. I got to get a weld on a piece of plate, drill it all out, and go in the city and get the parts, come back and try to get it to work. On tires that should never have been on the road in the first place. And how will the future look at the nuclear industry for making this happen? Like, you deserve a voice, and you deserve someone going to war for you every day, and for your loved ones, and for your friends and your families. And Greenpeace blocked me. All the foundations refused to even look at me. We need, this is not a game. We gotta get this together, and we have to push back. And so welcome Welcome to the resistance. You are the resistance. Have a great night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. And because we got no choice, we have to go to war every night. Take care, folks.